Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Thursday at 10:16. Pretty decent day, a little overcasty, but the weather has been pretty kick-ass lately, so it's been really nice. So yeah, I got a couple of shows coming up that I am really excited about doing. A couple of movies that I haven't actually seen in a really, really long time. One is the original, and then there was a remake that came out shortly after. So I'm really excited about diving into those movies. I'm gonna watch the original. I'm not gonna say what movies they are until I upload the videos. But really excited. I haven't watched either version in a wicked long time. And one of the first one I'm gonna be doing, the first movie I'm gonna be covering, I'm gonna rewatch them back to back. So that should be exciting. Rewatching a lot of the times, I mean, there are good examples of that, but a lot of the times, when there's a reimagining, or if you will, or a remake of a film, it's okay or not very good. There's been some examples of where it's good. I think like the Evil Dead reboot that was directed by Fede Alvarez was definitely a primetime example of doing it um, successfully. So stay tuned. There'll be some new shows. There's always new shows coming. Always thinking of new ideas. And lately, I've been doing the movie, my usual movie reviews, and that's been a lot of fun. And then I've been doing some more fetish driven videos, and that's been a lot of fun. And then I've been also experimenting with incorporating some of those kinds of elements, the fetish stuff, with kind of experimental music, some improv music, and making it more of a, like, well, I guess more or less like a short improvised kind of video. And that was a lot of fun. And I did that lately. I did that really recently, where I kind of had this plan of what I wanted to do, but the whole kind of vibe of what I was thinking was to try to do the video in one take, and to have it really improv based. The music that I used for the short video was purely improvised, and I just kind of did it in one take. I just wanted to kind of create the space, create this vibe, and use the music to do this video. And then the video was done the same way. So it was super fun. I'm going to be collaborating with somebody pretty soon on doing a video in that kind of vein. So we'll see. It's a fun new thing. I've been listening to a lot of well, I've been listening to a lot of weird noise music lately. So that's been a big inspiration. And so yeah, and again, it's all part of the same thing for this channel. And I just uploaded a video this morning. I just uploaded a few minutes ago. I recorded it yesterday. It's a pretty long video. It's about 48 minutes or so, but the video's all about my situation on how I started to play with a really amazing local band called Osmia, and kind of the series of the circumstances that led to that, and it's been just super awesome. So it was kind of, I think for me it was a really unique experience, because I had never really, I guess, come into a band quite that way before, where I was a big fan of a band for a number of years, and kind of followed them. Got a chance to actually, play a show together with my band Quantam with them, and over a period of 4 years or so, I got to know them, and then one thing led to another, and then just this past December became a member of the band, and then we did a tour shortly after that, and we've been playing shows since then, and it's been just totally fun. So I did a video on on that whole kind of situation and being a member of Osmio that I just uploaded. So please, yeah, check out that video. And also, we have some more shows coming up. The next show that we have coming up is at Hey Sailor next month. So yeah, great stuff. And today's show is going to be another music show where this was something I wanted to kind of do, and I had never really, I guess, talked about it before. But today's show is going to be about my band Quantum and our most recent show that we did about just shy of 2 weeks ago, where we played at the All Roads Festival. So I wanted to kind of make a video about that whole experience. It was a just totally epic weekend. And then also, this last show that we had at the All Roads Festival was our third gig there. We played there twice before, about 2 years ago. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit and just kind of talk about the overall vibe of the festival. So yeah, here we go. So the All Roads Festival is a pretty cool music festival. It's a festival that started about 10 years ago. The other big significant thing about this this past All Roads Festival, which was just about 2 weeks ago now already. It's crazy. It was a culmination of a lot of things. It was their 10-year anniversary, so it was a big thing. Because in this day and age, for especially anything in the music industry to last, and to have sustainability is pretty tough, and especially a festival, you know, of the scale that the festival is. It's, I think, like I have gotten a chance as a musician. I've played at a lot of festivals in my time here in Maine, and I've played in some festivals out of state, mostly here in Maine. And where, some festivals are, they have the sponsorship, they have a sound guy. It's very much a kind of a living, breathing thing. And then some other festivals are, just kind of getting by the skin of their teeth. They have a shoestring budget, but they manage to make it work, and it's all like in one location, that kind of thing. They don't have the big sponsorship. So, but overall, I have to say the All Roads Festival, in my experience, has definitely been the best music festival I've ever been a part of. And I also, aside from me getting a chance to play at festivals and music festivals, I've gone to a lot of music festivals, in my free time, just as going as a fan of music. And I think even from that perspective, it's it's probably the best festival all around. And I think especially this past year, this most recent festival was probably the best one I ever saw. Like, there were really big crowds. The people there that were in attendance were really, really hungry and eager for music. And and I think because it was the 10-year anniversary, it really, it brought some more people. It was a little bit more of a buzz to it. But I think, all around, what they do is pretty spectacular. And the All Roads Festival was created by Meg Charette, who is a local person who lived in Bangor. I have known Meg Charette actually for a very, very long time. About, probably 12 years ago now. It might even be more. I met Meg Charette. She used to own. She is based out of Portland, Maine, and has been for a few years now. But she lived in Bangor, Maine, which is about an hour from here. And at that time, she owned a an art gallery that was also a music venue, and she had all kinds of bands playing there. She had a lot of they had a lot of punk shows, metal shows, experimental shows, all kinds of stuff. But it was a real kind of hub. It was a small little gallery, but tons of people would show up to their events, and they would have all kinds of real interesting bands, and it was a really great time. And I think it was like a few years after, maybe 3 or 4 years after I had started Quantum, or so, give or take a year. It's kind of a blur, but I I had one or two kind of mutual friends in Bangor at the time, and somehow I had met Meg through those folks, and then I found out about her music space, this really cool little art gallery that she owned. I can't remember the name of it right now. And I had I think I had gone there to a show once or twice, and I was really like really kind of blown away. It was such a cool scene. There was a lot of enthusiasm for music and more at that, especially during that time for like underground music. And remember, shortly after going there, I got in contact with her and tried to and set up some Quantum shows there. And I think we did 2 or 3 shows there. And I was able to kind of bill, and I brought in some other bands that I was in contact with at the time, and they were really great. We had one especially that was really really awesome, and we played a few shows there as Quantum, and then also we had a slew of other bands. There was one band at that time that was really really awesome that is now long gone, called Taboo, and they were just this wild kind of noise. I don't know. They're hard to describe. They were kind of like Black Sabbath, but on lots of hallucinogens. I don't know, and very out there. Definitely on the noise kind of level, but heavy and very dark. Amazing band. They were like at that time probably my favorite local band, and got to see them play a bunch of times, and then had played a handful of shows with them. And during that time, we started playing Quantum gigs, and again, this was pretty early on in the festival. I mean, in the history of Quantum, we started playing in Bangor a little bit more. We were playing, we played a few shows at Meg's Gallery, like 2 or 3 shows. We played a bigger show at this Japanese Thai fusion place called Zen, which is now under a different name. We did a big show there, and that was really awesome. We had a bunch of bands play there, and kind of used the whole space, and that was a really great show. Really cool venue. We played a couple of house parties up there. I remember we played once at this really awesome. It was a private party, but it was a Halloween party, and that was super cool. One of the more memorable shows. And then we also played a handful of other smaller shows like house parties, and really great, just fantastic. And again, this was a long time ago, and we have not played. And there was also a theater up there that we had played at, which nobody showed up, but it was still a pretty fun experience. So there was a time when we were kind of playing in Bangor, quite a bit. But then fast forward, quite a few years later, there used to be in Belfast many years ago. There used to be this music festival called the Free Range Music Festival, which was an amazing festival that brought in so much cool music. There was so much diversity that of what you would see, and it was just wild. I mean, at that time at the Free Range Festival, I mean, I remember there were some times where I would see like they would have a jazz big band, and then they would have a venue also that just had pure kind of noise music, and then there'd be punk bands, and then they'd have a reggae band. I mean, it was just, it was just wild. They also had John Fishman, who plays in the band Fish. They had him playing with his band. I mean, it was just like so much diversity, and I can't really remember how long it ran for, but the festival went for a few years. But then it ran into this real financial rut. Like basically, they started losing money, and they had some problems financially, and they weren't able to continue it, unfortunately. And some of the people that were really key in running the festival and bringing in all of these bands and musicians ended up kind of moving away. So the whole thing kind of fell apart, and it was sad because that was an incredible festival. I'd gone to it a couple times, and then I was in a couple of bands at the time and got a chance to play there. But it was amazing. And then so then I don't know. It might have been like 5 or 6 years went by or so, and then it was announced that there was going to be this new festival taking place in Belfast. And Belfast, again, is a local town. It's about 7 minutes from my house. Really cool, small little town. There's a lot of for it being a tiny little area. It's a really cool downtown, but there's a lot of great little shops. There's a cool movie theater. You have a nice co-op there, and it's a really great community. But there's so much art going on. There's so much music. There's a lot of culture, especially during that time. So it's kind of a little hub for all those things, and so it was like a kind of a perfect location for it. And it's a beautiful town. It's right where it's a coastal town. We're right on the ocean. I mean, it doesn't get any more beautiful than that. So 5 or 6 years later, the All Roads Festival was announced that this was going to be a new thing. And 10 years later, here we are. So, and it was headed and is still run by Meg Charette, of course. This was her baby, her brainchild. And the first few years of it, it seemed to be more geared towards kind of straight up, well, not straight up, but more, well, conventional or to a degree, like indie rock bands. There wasn't as much diversity. I felt the first few years because I went to it a couple times. Just as I had a curiosity in wanting to support this thing, and I noticed that it seemed to be there wasn't quite as much diversity as the All Roads Festival. I mean, as the Free Range Festival, but it was still good and it was still fun and it brought in a lot of people, and 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 in many ways it was a more efficiently run festival. They seem to really have a real I don't know. They really seem to have the whole thing together as far as getting, a good sound company to do the sound to have, and then they also expanded it to where they had multiple venues going. They had a ton of bands, and shit tons of people would come into Belfast. Like it was crazy. They were definitely, after the first year or two of this festival, there were definitely, I'd say, maybe twice the amount of people showing up to this to the All Roads Festival as opposed to the Free Range Festival. Like it was pretty massive, and it just seemed to grow. And I had during that time I had tried getting a Quantum gig there, and it was hard, And I think it was due, and then other bands, a lot of the bands also were more Portland based. I think at the time there was this kind of ongoing joke that it was like the Portland takeover, and to a degree it was true, but and it was harder to get in. I noticed it was harder to get get the ball rolling for say localized bands. But eventually, after a few years that the festival was running was going, I noticed that a lot of local bands that were in the area, because where I live here in Belfast, Northport, just in the mid coast area, again, it's a very small coastal area. but there's a great population, and again, there's so much talent in this area. So, over after a few years, I noticed that, and at that time too, there was, I mean, there still is, but there doesn't seem to be quite as much original bands. I noticed not as many in the local area as there once was a few years ago, which is a little bit, disconcerting. But there's still a lot of music going on. So, but after a few years that the festival was going, I noticed that there were more and more, bands, local, very local bands playing at the festival and getting on the bill, which was great, and still having bands from out of state and from Portland and what have you. And so about 2 years ago, we were able to do a Quantum show there, and then we were asked to do a second show, which was really really cool because at that time the festival had somewhat of a policy of you'd get booked there and then you wouldn't really be playing there the next year. Like it might, basically there's so many bands, there's so many artists in the area. So it was allowing the space for all of these different artists and bands to kind of get their chance to play. And so I was really excited that we got asked to play twice because that never happened before that I knew of. And we played a Saturday and a Sunday. And we played that Friday. Usually the festival has a few bands in the evening at Marshall Wharf, and it's essentially like kind of the kickoff of the festival. They have an opening party. And then the big time of the festival is that Saturday where basically the music starts at like 11 o'clock in the morning and goes till 1 o'clock in the morning, all day Saturday night. And they have like, four or five or six really, 5 or 6 venues going at the same time. And it's wild. Like, so, we were fortunate to play at Marshall Wharf that at the opening party. And I don't know, like with my band Quantum, like we've played all kinds of shows. We've played, we've been a band. Somehow we've been able to do this weird thing that we do and somehow sustain it. And I'm so incredibly beyond words grateful for that. And we've played, tiny little gigs, where we've played at, you know, in people's living rooms, where we've played these tiny little spaces. We've played at, restaurants, where people are eating. We've played at, kind of dive bar punk clubs. We've played at some really, really nice, beautiful theaters. We've played at some really big venues. We've played, I don't know, I kind of feel like with this band, we've played at virtually every venue that you can imagine, size-wise and what have you. And we've had, all kinds of experience doing that, and which is great. Even if the shows are not great, and sometimes, we're, you're not really, it's not really clicking, or maybe you have sound issues, or you have shows of where the sound isn't very good. We had a lot of times, and to a degree still do, but past couple of years it hasn't been much of a thing, but we have had a lot of experience where for shows we have to run our own sound, so of course that's other things to worry about. And I will say that the show that we played at, with all of the trials and tribulations around that, we've played some shows that have been just, some of the most, for me personally, just some of the most incredible moments, for me artistically, and just, just some of the most incredible shows I've ever been a part of. We had played probably the best show we ever played as a band. We played at this festival in Montreal at this gorgeous venue, huge theater in Montreal, and that was just an absolutely incredible experience. And we've had some other experiences as a band where it's just everything was somehow everything really lined up. But that night when we played at Marshall Wharf was, I felt like, just incredible. It was just such an incredible evening. It was one of the most magical nights and one of the most fun nights I've ever had in my life. And it was also like, if not the best gig, one of the best gigs we ever got a chance to play at as a band. And it was really due to we were on a really good slot. We were like a little bit in the mid evening, like 9 o'clock, 8:30 or something like that. And we were the first band to kind of go on during this shift. So we were. And the other thing about the All Roads Festival, they have a sound company, and the sound guys are just absolutely incredible. These guys are just amazing. They're the best sound company and sound guys, engineer guys for live concerts that I have ever dealt with. Super professional, amazing gear. There's no stress. There's no fuss. And they're all really cool, really flexible, and yeah, there's nothing but great things I could say about that. And I attribute that definitely to Meg Charette with really running a well oiled and finely tuned machine, because doing this festival is logistically it's a fucking nightmare. So I don't know how she's able to pull it off and have it run so well. I've had some experience running music festivals. I ran a music festival for 3 years in a row, and it was super fun and it was great. We had 1 or 2 years where it was just really fantastic, but it was exhausting. And after doing it 3 years in a row, I just was like, I can't do this anymore. It was that much. So a pretty unbelievable feat to accomplish. And because of the billing that we were on, and it was also at the Marshall Wharf in Belfast, which is kind of the best location in Belfast to play a gig or to go see live music. It's literally, well, I will say my favorite place to see music and my all-time favorite venue and the best venue around, hands down, is Hey Sailor. But Marshall Wharf is incredible, and we were able to go in early, set up, and we were able to do a full sound check and not have to worry about our monitor mix and just the overall sound. We went in, we were able to take our time, set up, because a big part of people who might not be aware of what it's like to be doing a gig live. A huge thing of it is because a lot of bands have to worry about running their own sound. Is sometimes 70% of what you have to think about is just getting a good sound dialed in, and then you have to try to put on a good performance, which into itself is kind of this monumental task to be on your A game, because it's a lot of work. Physically and mentally, it's a lot of focus. So not having to worry about the sound and having all of that stuff completely taken care of and feeling like you don't have to worry is such it's the best feeling that a musician or a band can have, because then you just have to worry about putting on a good show. That's it. So because of that factor, I felt like we played really, really well, and there was a certain energy in the audience, and there was a lot of people there. I don't know. It was truly an amazing experience. There was so much energy in the room, and yeah, it was an incredible experience. And I remember staying. There was a bunch of bands that played after. We just stayed and drank beer, and I stayed up to the wee hours of the morning, and it was just awesome. And it was one of the best weekends I've ever had, just in general. And so the next day, Saturday, we had another Quantum gig where we played at the Maskers Theater, which is an old church. and that was a totally different kind of setting. It was in a, it wasn't you know, it was more of a sit down kind of audience. There wasn't, it wasn't at a bar. There wasn't any alcohol being served. It was early. It was like 4 o'clock, and it was like in this church. But it's a beautiful venue. The Maskers is a theater group, and they recently had bought during that time had bought this church to basically convert it into a theater. They have an upstairs, which is a really beautiful theater, and then they have a downstairs called the Underground Lounge, which is a small intimate theater, but it's a beautiful spot. So we had our next gig that Saturday. Were replayed at the Maskers, and it was super fun. Again, it was a totally different vibe, a little bit more laid back, and we played a different set. We always try to play a different set each gig, or try to always bring in different tunes. And again, it's always about the vibe. For me, when I play a gig with Quantum, it's really like I never go in with a set list, because I feel like the vibe, like the feeling that you get when you're in the venue and you're about to play, whether there's a lot of people there or whether there's just a couple of people there, whether people seem to be kind of hyped up and enthusiastic, or, just depending on what the vibe is, that determines how things are going to go. And then if you kind of, establish something, and if you're having a good, go of it, then you can kind of build it. That's the whole point of it. But I find it's like I totally, however I'm feeling, however the vibe is, the energy is in that room is what I will try to adjust to. I think as a performer, especially with what we do with Quantum, there's a big period of always adjusting. Like for me as a musician, I feel like I'm a very sloppy musician. I don't really know exactly what I'm doing. Our music is very, very rehearsed and very regimented that way and very practiced. But the way the songs and everything is structured, there's a lot of areas of where we can kind of improvise. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do originally, and one of the things that I set out to do with the band, with the music for Quantum, was I wanted it to be a thing of where it can live and breathe in the moment, and then we could have a gig where we're not playing very well, we have these other issues. You take it with the good and bad, but you try to adjust to those things. And I set out to, by trying to approach playing gigs that way, it's going to be hopefully really different each time, a different energy, a different, there's going to be some different colors going on, different vibes. There's going to be a variety. That's hopefully that's always been my goal with how we approach just the performance. And then also, this is a film channel, and also, it's a big space for me to kind of get into the theatrical mode of the band, because that's a massive, massive thing for me, and that's all my influences with film and movies. So, and that's why we use a lot of masks. I wear a lot of different kinds of masks and wigs, and have like try to really incorporate a certain kind of light scheme, light setup, but especially with the mask and the theatrical element, I try to like put on a show, and not just. It works for some bands, obviously, but not just a jean and t-shirt scenario. But I want it to be, an experience, and show my. I'm perfectly fine with showing my. I'm proud of it, showing my inspiration from films on my sleeve. So that's what that's about. So we try to put on a show also, not just play the music, because I feel like both of those things are integral. So, it is what it is. And then, so we played that Saturday, and it was really fun. And then we got to, one of the perks of the festival, of the All Roads festivals, you get, if you're a performer, you get a pass, and you can go to all the venues for free, and and check out all the music. And that Saturday I stayed in town, and we went out for dinner or something after our gig, and then we just checked out a bunch of bands, and then I pretty much pulled another all nighter. Went to Marshall Wharf, went to every venue, and saw all kinds of amazing music. And at that time too, it was more. It was still like there was a lot of folk, there was some rock, incredible music. But this past year, the one that was 2 weeks ago, was just really awesome. It was a little bit of a different circumstance. We played on Saturday at the closing party, and we had a good time slot. We were playing before this band called Scobie, which is just an absolutely incredible band in Maine. Just an amazing rock band, punk band. I mean, they have like a metalcore sound. Incredible band. So we were fortunate to kind of play before them. And the Friday night, again, we played on Saturday at Marshall Wharf at like 9:30. But that Friday, I had a gig with Osmio at Hey Sailor, and before that gig, during the day, I went to the check-in, the main headquarters, the band check-in, and I got my badge and my pass and all that stuff, because what my goal was to go to the opening party after our gig, because our gig was getting done at like 10 o'clock, pretty early, 9:30, 10. And Hey Sailor's like, 5 minutes from Marshall Wharf, so I was like, this will be cool. And that's what I did. I got my pass, and then after we were done playing our gig at Hey Sailor, I went over to Marshall Wharf, and it was great. I mean, there was so many awesome bands. My friend Ben was playing drums for another just incredible band called Bait Bag, really great punk band. And I had some beers. I got, well, not drunk, but I got a pretty serious buzz on. I had beers at Hey Sailor before. I had to drive, so I was, pretty responsible. But I was all up all night, and yeah, I didn't sleep very well Friday, but it was great. It was so worth it. And then Saturday, I woke up and I was kind of hurting. I was moving really slow. Eventually, got my shit together, but I wanted to really check out that Saturday. I really wanted to go into town early because we weren't playing till 9:30, and I wanted to check out as much stuff as I could. And I know, I probably needed time to kind of chill and relax before a gig because, you know, that's a lot of stimulation for, 24 hours. But it's a good stimulation. So I decided to do it, and I went into town pretty early and checked out so much music. And so much of the music that I saw was just incredible. Like, I saw everything. I saw a death metal band, I saw a bluegrass band, I saw some incredible, like, real trippy kind of folk music, solo artists, full bands. I mean, just all kinds of shit. I saw the thing that immediately stood out to me this year was the amount of diverse genres that was represented. It was by far the most varied bill of bands I had ever seen at the festival. So that was really awesome. It rained like crazy, like it rains every weekend, and especially during that festival, it always just pours, and it just rained all day, and it was shitty out weather-wise. But there were a ton of people out early. I noticed that right away, so that was a cool sign. And there were, on that Friday night, there was a shit ton of people, and so the opening party and the closing party is always the biggest kind of thing for the festival. And then, but I realized on the bill we were kind of like sandwiched on Saturday. That Saturday night, we were sandwiched in the middle of a bunch of other bands. So I knew we were probably not going to have the luxury of being able to, roll in, take our time, do a full sound check, and then kind of chill out and relax and then play. I had a feeling it was going to be, kind of a crunch, hurrying up, setting up, playing, breaking down, getting out of there, and that's it. And but I was like, okay, we'll roll with it. That's not ideal, but that's just how it is. So I talked to the sound guy. Eventually that day, I found out who the sound guy was, and it actually was the same guy and same crew of people that ran sound for us 2 years ago, which was awesome. And he said, yeah, basically you have 15 minutes to set up, and then you have 15 minutes there's a 15-minute gap between bands. You have 15 minutes to set up your shit, and then you have to play. And because there's so many bands on the bill over the course of a day and of a night, they really run. The All Roads Festival really runs a tight ship, which is great. Because in my past history of going to festivals and then playing at festivals, a lot of the times you don't know actual time slots. Things get pushed way behind. The sound guys and the bands get too high, and it's just like this. You don't really know what the hell's going on. This was not the case. This was like, okay, you're billed to play at 8:15. You have to start right at 8:15, and then you end at 9:15, and then like clockwork, you got to go on to the next thing. And that's how everything was run. I mean, it was all proficient. So I knew, okay, we're not gonna have that ideal thing situation again like we did when we first played, of having the luxury of taking our time setting up, doing a full sound check, and then having a little bit of time to chill and then play. This was going to be like, okay, bam, 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 plug in, make sure everything's working, play. So, so what I ended up doing was I got my stuff because I knew I wasn't going to have very much time at all to set up. I unloaded my stuff about an hour or two beforehand, and it was a little tricky because it was raining out, and all of my stuff is electronic, so I had to like cover all my shit with garbage bags and find a spot at Marshall Wharf where I could set everything up essentially and not get anything wet, because that would not be good. So I, an hour, 2 hours before we were going to play, that's what I did. I basically got my truck set up close to the venue and unloaded all my stuff, which isn't a lot of stuff. It's not a lot of gear, but it's just a lot of cords and shit like that. So I basically got all my stuff loaded in, and then I just basically I set everything up. I set everything up. I got all the cords plugged in, got everything arranged that I needed. Tried to keep track of what I had, and found a little spot to where I had just enough room to do all of that. And the whole plan was, okay, get all this stuff totally set up, and then when it comes to where we have to set up on stage, I can just I can just prop that stuff on stage, and then just all I have to do then is just plug everything in, and then that will save a tremendous amount of time. So that's what I did, and it was a funny, funky billing, because there was, when I was there, like, again, there was a like a '60s inspired rock band, and then there was like this kind of acid jazz group that was pretty cool and interesting, kind of a mellow. They had this kind of mellow blue note classic jazz sound, but like more modern. And then before us, Alice Limos, um, who is a jazz folk singer, played right before us, and she played right before us, and it was such a weird bill. The other thing I noticed about this year, past years they had a handful of other electronic artists, but this year they only had one, the Meat Beats, which is definitely electro, but we were pretty much the only electronic artists on the bill, which was different and cool. But usually in the past there's other electronic artists and stuff. So this year we seemed to be the only electronic artist. So we were put on right after Alice's set, and her stuff is cool, but it's like uber mellow. It's uber mellow. It's basically just piano and voice and guitar and voice, but it's super mellow. And I'm like, this is. And then right after that, there was going to be a punk band playing after us. So it was just like, wow, like, this is a crazy billing. But I'm all for the variety, and that's part of the thing of being a musician is, there's so many things out of your control, but you just try to adjust to it, and just go with it. Go with the flow. and make things as easy as possible, and be as flexible as possible, and not be um, not be a dick and not be a tight ass about things, because there's so many variables that are out of your control. So I was like, okay, we have to follow this really mellow set. What are we gonna do? So when she was done, basically that's what we did, and that's what I did is we loaded our stuff in, and because I did all of this prep work on setting everything up, that part of it was actually pretty easy. I got all my stuff plugged in, and then it took me about 6 minutes to do all that, and I had it all set up, and I was ready to go. And then Mike set up his bass rig, and that doesn't take very much time at all. It takes a lot less time for him to do his stuff. If I did not take those steps and set up my equipment beforehand, I would have been cutting it really, really close, and that could have been aggravating. That would have. I don't think we would have had. We would have went. We would have, or I would have went over 15 minutes. So luckily, I did that, and we plugged in, got everything in, and then the sound guy was like, "Okay, let's make sure everything's working," and tested everything out. Tested a drum beat and my vocals and keyboard, and just made sure everything was working. And I made sure everything was coming through my monitor, and that was it. And then bam, we had to start. And for me, is like I said, like I've been playing music for a really long time, but I never really feel like technically I'm where I should be. Like I feel like I'm a sloppy player, and it takes me a long time to kind of get in the vibe and in the space. Sometimes it doesn't happen. But that's one thing why I really believe in practicing and working on all of these things, because of those, problems that I always have. And I've just accepted it. So it takes a long time for me, I feel, to warm up. And, the same goes for Quantum. But in this occasion, or this set, we had 45 minutes, so we don't have a lot of time to kind of dilly dally. So because of the mellow thing that was preceding us, I decided to open up with our really ambient track called "Stars Beneath Our Feet," which is just a pure ambient tune. And then we added the other tunes, and it ended up being, I don't know, a super fun gig. And by the end of it seemed like people were really into it, and it was a total blast, super fun. The people were really cool. And again, it was a totally different situation, because it was a little bit seat of your pants, because there was no proper time to do a real sound check. But it is what it is. And we ended up not going over. We ended up playing the right time. It felt like it was really good. Somebody did record it. Lenny Vision was there. He records all the local music shows, and he's just an amazing dude. So I'm anxious to see how that came out. But it felt pretty good. We got some pretty good feedback. But overall, it was just a wonderful experience. And, it's playing at that festival has been some of the best times ever. Not only getting a chance to see music, but to perform at it. So big shout out to everyone, Meg Charette, and for everybody making it work. So thanks again. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Peace.